Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for another video. This is my May 2023 currently inked. Okay, so the first pen and ink comparison that I have for this month is the TWSBI Eco with a medium nib. This one is inked with Organic Studio Nitrogen. This was one of the first bottles of ink that I purchased early on in my fountain pen journey, and I probably have not used it since my first year getting into fountain pens. So I want to try it out and see if I still like this high sheening ink. Initially, I had inked up one of my TWSBI Ecos with an extra fine nib with the Organic Studio Nitrogen. And I wanted to do that same thing again to see if my experiences differed, just like they did with Robert Oyster Rose Gold Antigua. But this pen actually has a medium nib, and I had already inked it up by the time I realized it was a medium nib on this pen. So we shall see how it goes. So this is my bottle ink for the month of May. The next pen and ink combination should not be such a surprise because this was one of the pairings that I was really interested in trying out for the month of May. This is my newest fountain pen, the Aurora 88, and it has a fine nib, an 18 karat fine nib, and it's inked up with Diamine Silent Night. So this is one of my two Inkvent colors for this month. My next Inkvent color, you can see the shimmer in here already. I really do like the shimmer in this one. This is my TWSBI Diamond 580 AL, I believe. It has a medium nib and it's inked up with Diamine Olive Swirl. So this is a shimmering ink. Hope you can see the shimmer on this one. Okay, so this month I didn't have any extra pen pal inks to test out. So I went to my stash of this many ink samples to try out some of the inks that I am really curious about. And I have a small container of ink samples that I would love to try. And so two of my currently inked pens came from this container. I really just pulled out two ink samples, kind of like Mandabi Ink Sweat. Interestingly enough, I pulled two red inks. So in the Pilot Kakuno, I have Jacques Herbin Rouge Hématite. This pen has a medium nib, and I learned my lesson from using the Visconti Mirage Mythos with a shimmer ink. This has a little bit of shimmer. I can barely tell. I really cannot see the shimmer in this pen or in the ink itself, but I can tell, since it's a demonstrator, that I am sufficiently mixing the ink just to give it the best chances of writing properly. So this is Rouge Matite. My second red ink that I pulled is Octopus Fluids Weinrot. That ink is in my Jinhao 80 with a fine nib. My next pen was actually purposefully inked up with a red ink. This is the Lamy 2000 with a fine nib, and this one has Diamine Writer's Blood. This is a super wet ink, and I was hoping to get a pleasant experience from this pen using a super wet ink. So this month it seems that I'm going to have 3 reddish inks. We'll see how it goes. These next 4 pens, or these last 4 pens for the month of May, are part of my ink comparison section. So these 2 pens will actually be inked up with the same ink color, Pilot Shizuku Inaho. I love this color, and I love just how well these 2 pens match the ink. Now, this Platinum 3776 Century has a soft fine nib, which writes pretty dry depending on the ink that you use. I had some trouble using this with a sheening ink, so I am hoping to have a pleasant experience with this, but I was also very cautious about it because it may end up being super light in this pen because the lines are so fine. So I also inked up the Pelikan M400 with an extra fine nib. It's extra fine, but it's actually thicker than this soft fine nib. Hopefully I will have a pleasant experience from at least one of them. The next ink and pen combination is the Pilot. I just loved it so much last month, I had to ink it up again. The Pilot Vanishing Point with a fine nib. It is inked up with Troublemaker Tuslabua, and I am so excited to see how it writes with this ink color. And it is so very similar. It's a little bit deeper and a little greener than Inaho. So I'm really wondering what my preferences are going to be at the end of this month. And the last was supposed to be Cassia Flora, because the writing of this ink is so similar to Pilot Shizuku Inaho, and I really wanted to see if I ended up liking the way that this ink flows from a pen. But I had some cross-contamination while I was inking up my pens. I used a dirty syringe that still had writer's blood in it to fill up this pen with Krishna Cassioflora. So this ink is probably going to be a little bit more brown reddish than what you see here on this card. I've lost the sample, but I'm not exactly heartbroken because it wasn't one of my favorites, but I'm just so curious about what this mystery color is going to look like when I start writing with it. So it's still in my currently inked. So it's a combination of Diamine Writer's Blood and Krishna Cassioflora. Okay, so before I move on to the writing samples, I do want to say that I would probably add a couple more pens to my May 2023 currently inked. Once I take a look at the samples that we receive in this month's ink flight, I'll make a decision on which inks I'd like to add to the currently inked for this month. All right, so let's do some writing samples. This is such a juicy, juicy combination. Oh my goodness. I know that Twisbees are super juicy, and I wonder how this is going to look once it dries. It's probably going to be one of those sheening monsters. First impression, I really do like the feedback that this gives with the current ink. I'm not so sold on the color of the ink though. It looks a bit underwhelming. It's a super duper dark, like a blue black that really does look almost black. It's so close to black. Let's see if this is actually going to be a pleasant experience this month. That was a hard start at the very beginning. I also should note that I selected this ink because I also wanted to compare it to these other inks that I have that I'm using for the month of May. These three, along with Olive Swirl. But Cassioflora is not going to look like that. So really, I'm going to be just taking a closer look at how I like these three inks. That is so very red. I think I'm a little turned off by how bright that red is. I do like my deeper colors, but we'll see if the sheen and shimmer kind of help me out with the brightness of this red. It is just so bright. Okay, by comparison, I would prefer this one. All right, so my diagnostic test is the Lamy 2000. Let's see how I like this pen and ink combination. Ooh, oh wow. I think it might be the feedback. It might be the feedback that's catching me off guard with this fountain pen. It might not be the wetness of the ink itself, but it's just the way that the nib feels on the paper. I don't know. I think I might need to give this pen a chance, just like I did with the Pilot Custom 74. I remember how rough initially the feedback felt using the Pilot Custom 74 fine nib. And I'm sort of feeling that way with this one as well, but it's a wider nib. This fine feels like a medium. It writes like a medium, but it has that same type of feedback as the Pilot Custom 74 fine. So wet. Even though this is a super duper wet ink, I do like it in this pen. Hopefully the ink flow will even out over time. Since this is freshly inked, I'm hoping that it'll write a little bit drier. So I like how it wrote Diamine Writer's Blood. So by the time I got to the third line, it was more manageable. So hopefully, as I give this pen and ink combination a little bit more opportunities, a few more opportunities to shine, I will warm up to it a little bit more. Okay, I'm nervous about this one. This is the Platinum 3776 Century Soft Fine Nib inked up with Pilot Rosa Zucchino. This one is going to be very interesting. I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but currently I believe I'm having more positive experiences with these other combinations so far. I currently like the ink better in the Pelican M400, but I'm still going to continue with the two of them just so that I can really see how they perform through my daily journaling. Okay, and this is our contaminated ink, a reddish Cassioflora probably. Oh, okay. So I believe that I dipped the nib in Cassioflora before I filled it up with the dirty syringe. So you're going to see this is actually true to the color. Cassioflora is true to the swatch here. Once the ink in the converter goes through the feed and to the nib, once I start pulling from that converter, it's probably going to show up a little bit more red over time. The color is actually quite nice. Yes, that Organic Studio Nitrogen is definitely sheening. And you should be able to see the Twisby Diamond 580 Diamine Olive Swirl is shimmering as well. This is a very interesting combination of inks. So I've got 3 reds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pens inked up with a greenish sort of ochre color, and then 2 blues, red, green, and blue, RGB. So that's my month. In the Hobonichi weeks, let's take a look at Iroful paper. It is so smooth on this paper. I love this paper. Iroful, the Aurora 88. Yes, that looks almost black. Yes, this is a Japanese medium nib. I heard a little bit of scratchiness with this nib. I might need to take a look at this. The heart start. I like how crisp it looks with the Platinum 3776. It's interesting how it looks like this is less saturated because it looks so different, because they look so different. Is something cross-contaminated, or is this what Pilot Iroshizuku Inoho looks like in a soft fine or a super duper fine nib versus a medium-ish nib? See, that was the color that I was hoping for last month. I don't know if I can show this properly, but this ink, it's pooled on top of the paper. There we go. This is a super wet ink, a wet combination. That's a wet combination, and so is this one. The paper is actually buckling or warping a little bit underneath all of this ink. Are there any? No, there's no bleed through. There's a fair bit of ghosting, but there's no bleed through. So yeah, once again, this is Iroful paper. Okay, so I'm also going to do the same thing on Tomoe River, 52 GSM Tomoe River paper, and Midori letter paper. And I will be back once I finish writing all of this down. Okay, so this is the next day. I had to stop and pick up the kids from school, but I wanted to come back and show you the writing samples for each of this month's inks. Ink samples on the Yu-sari paper, Organic Studio Nitrogen. Diamine Silent Night looks almost black. I don't see much sheening on the Rouge Matite and no shimmer really. Octopus Fluids Fine Coat. I actually do like these two. Cassioflora it actually looks better than I was anticipating or expecting. I don't like how it looks on the coloring card. I actually prefer how it looks in writing. Pilot Iroshizuku Inoho in a finer nib and a thicker and wetter nib. I actually like the shading in the M400 extra fine nib. Troublemaker Inks Tuslabua is a very nice greenish ink, but it's very close to these 2 inks. Diamine Olive Swirl. Let's see if I can get some shimmer. There we go. This is Iroful paper, Midori letter paper, and Tomoe River 52 GSM paper. All right, so these are my first impressions of the inks that I'll be using in the month of May. And over the next few weeks, I will be becoming more familiar with these pen and ink combinations, and I'll be providing my feedback in another video soon. Until then, have a great day. Bye-bye.